You know that feeling when you try to give someone advice in English and it doesn't land right? Maybe it sounds way too harsh or so weak that they just ignore it? Well, finding the perfect word is totally an art form, and we're going to break down exactly how to get it right.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the basics. The standard advice you'll probably use every day. Then we'll crank up the intensity and talk about urgent warnings. After that, we'll cool things down with some gentler suggestions. And finally, we'll pull it all together so you know exactly which word to grab for any situation.
Here's the most important thing to get. Not all advice is created equal. Seriously, the word you pick can change everything. It can turn a helpful tip into a serious warning, or a strong recommendation into a simple, hey, just an idea kind of suggestion. It's all about the nuance.
We've all been there, right? You see a friend who's struggling and you really want to help, but you're worried about sounding bossy or, I don't know, maybe not helpful at all. Getting that tone just right is absolutely everything. So let's dive in, starting with the most common tool in the entire advice-giving toolkit.
All right, your go-to words, the ones you'll use most of the time, are should, and its really close cousin, ought to. Think of these as the dependable workhorses of giving advice.
What's pretty cool about should and ought to is just how flexible they are. I mean, they can be as gentle as saying, hey, this is probably a good idea, or as firm as, listen, this is an important duty. The situation you're in and your tone of voice do a ton of the heavy lifting here.
Honestly, in most everyday chats, should and ought to are practically the same thing. Both of these sentences just mean, hey, here's my advice. You can pretty much use either one and people will know exactly what you mean. Oh, and you want a little tip to sound more natural? In casual conversation, a lot of native speakers just blend ought to into one sound, oughta, as in I oughta study. It's super informal, really common, and it just makes your English sound a bit more relaxed. Now, what about when you're telling someone not to do something? In that case, shouldn't is the absolute winner. It's common, everyone uses it, and yeah, ought not to technically exists, but you'll almost never hear anyone say it, so just stick with shouldn't. It's simple, and you really can't go wrong.
Okay, let's dial up the intensity a bit. Sometimes advice isn't just a good idea, it's a warning. And for those moments, you need something much stronger. You need had better.
When you hear someone say this, it's not just a casual suggestion. There's this sense of urgency, like a little unspoken or else just hanging in the air. This phrase is a signal that there's a problem coming if the advice is ignored. So what is that bad thing that's about to happen? The real power of had better is that it forces you, the listener, to imagine what that negative consequence is. It makes you fill in the blank. And in this case, the implied threat is pretty obvious. We're going to be stranded. So just remember this crucial difference. Had better is not for friendly suggestions. It's for urgent advice where there's a real negative consequence if you don't listen.
Just a couple of quick grammar things to keep in mind here. You'll often hear it shortened to "de better," like you'd better go. And the negative is super simple. You had better not be late. Easy, right? All right, so we've covered our standard advice and our urgent warnings. But what if you want to be, less direct, a bit more gentle? Well, that's where could comes in. It's the softest touch of them all. The difference here is actually huge. Saying you could talk to your teacher makes it sound like just one of many options. It's like you're just brainstorming with them. But when you say you should talk to your teacher, that's a direct recommendation. You're being more of a guide, basically saying, hey, I really think this is the best thing for you to do. Okay, so this is where it all really clicks into place. Let's put these three tools side by side and see how they stack up in a final head-to-head comparison. Think of this table as your ultimate cheat sheet. You're going to use could when you're just tossing out possibilities. You'll use should for your standard, solid recommendations. And you save had better for those urgent moments when you really need to communicate a clear warning. Gentle, standard, or strong, now you've got the right tool for every single situation. So, let's end with one last challenge for you. Picture this. You bought a pair of shoes and they just don't fit. You've only worn them around the house, but that return window is closing fast. There's a very clear negative consequence here, right? You're going to lose your money. So, what had you better do? The answer's obvious, because now you know. The right words make all the difference.